الله أكبر الله.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه. أعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of the Khutbah today, I would ask, as I asked before the beginning of each Khutbah, that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad who may be suffering or in some kind of distress. And for the most part, we don't know about the collective suffering of individuals in certain nations. We don't know about the sufferings of what's going on in other folks' households, whether it's domestic, right here in the city of Winston-Salem and across the country, and definitely not know the specifics of the kind of suffering that's going about throughout this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad. So the general law is consistent, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve the suffering and distress of our brothers and sisters across this world, even if it's in our own households, is the most powerful weapon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. That is the tool, the weapon of dua. Let us remember our brothers and sisters, as we've said so many times, that every single week we can point to another area in this world where the Muslims are experiencing some kind of suffering. Let us not forget our Rohingya brothers and sisters who have become totally landless. They have been stripped of their citizenship in the country of Burma. They have been and living, most of them still are living outside of the country of Bangladesh. And they're living in concentration camps under some of the worst conditions on earth. Let us not forget about these landless people who, because they were Muslim and for no other reason, not because they were even being accused of being some kind of domestic terrorists, but simply because they were Muslim, they were targeted and driven, for the most part, out of the country, and those that remained have no citizenship in their country of origin, in Myanmar, in Burma, I said Bangladesh. In Myanmar, Bangladesh is a nation that has taken in by the tens of thousands so many Bengalis, so many. The Bengalis have accepted them in the region of Bangladesh, the Rohingyas. So let's remember them in our dua. Let us remember our brothers and sisters in Sudan, a nation that is basically undergoing a severe power struggle. And as a result, what we find is that the scarcity of food, the inability to remain in one's house, in one's home, has become very rare. The scarcity of food is very common. So let us remember our brothers and sisters in the Sudan and anywhere on this earth, including right here in town where Muslims may be suffering for no matter what the reason may be. Brothers and sisters, I want to just speak just for a few moments, because the theme of the khutbah today seems to me to tie into this weekly dua that I ask that we make for our brothers and sisters who are suffering throughout the world. As you know much better than I, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed the natural resources, whether we're talking about oil, whether we're talking about diamonds, gold, whether we're talking about natural gas, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has strategically placed these valuable resources under the lands of the Muslims. That the Muslims would have to not want for anything if we utilize, if we were able to take advantage of the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to this ummah. Look at a Muslim nation, a majority Muslim country, whether you're talking about in Asia, whether you're talking about on the continent of Africa. Look throughout the world and just look at where there's such a massive concentration of valuable resources. There's no excuse. I know very little about economics, but I know enough to understand that if you and I, if the Muslim world used its resources to take care of its people, not for its leaders to treat these resources like it's their own little bank and become trillionaires and multi-trillionaires by ripping off the resources of the nation and just treating it that Allah has given this resource to me to do whatever I want. But when we look at the situation around the world, maybe even here in Winston-Salem, there's a common thread, unfortunately, that ties this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad together in relationship to how we relate and interact with our brothers and sisters around the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in revealing this Qur'an and giving us this sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad so that we don't have any excuse that I don't understand what Allah means for me to do by this ayah or that ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and protected even this sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad so we know exactly. If we just study that example, if we turn to our scholars, we have no excuse to not know how to practice this deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the revelation of the Qur'an to the Prophet Muhammad has given us this perfect system of life. That no matter what part of the world, no matter what time in human history, no matter what the majority of the population may be in any area, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this very unique system of life that's unlike anything that has been produced by any other nation. And for the purpose of the khutbah, I want to emphasize the speciality of the Brotherhood of Islam. And when I use this expression, brotherhood, we're talking about sisters as well. But this kind of unity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated for the Muslim, the kind of brotherhood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad in particular have demonstrated. What does it mean for a Muslim to say that this is my brother, this is my sister? Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala characterizes the nature of the brotherhood of the Muslims in just a portion of an ayah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِنَّمَا مُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, that the believers are a single brotherhood. The believers are a single brotherhood, and the example is set by the Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims throughout the generation, not through just words, but through those committed Muslims' actions have demonstrated that yes, this brotherhood of Islam is a single brotherhood. It's not for just one group of people. It's not just for one nationality. It's not for one or two racial groups or ethnicities. that the Brotherhood of Islam supersedes all of these distinctions that we make between each other. The Brotherhood of Islam has organized human society on the basis of unchanging values. It's not like the philosophies of political parties, that depending on which way the political climate is blowing, that in political parties in this country and around the world, those parties will now try to embrace which way we've determined the winds of fortune are blowing. Islam organized society around eternal values that don't change, that is just as true, this nature of this genuine brotherhood at the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, as it is right here in the United States today, that as it will be up to the time of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Brothers and sisters, this Brotherhood of Islam, as you know better than I, that is based on just revelation and is based on the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad SAW. Let me move forward here. Brothers and sisters, when we look at the beginning revelation of the Qur'an, it was revealed to a people that based on their tribalism and their system of tribalism, were one of the most divided communities of human beings, although albeit small. They were so divided that there were few people at that particular time that may have been so divided based on what tribe, what family do I belong to, as those pre-Islamic Arabs in the Hijaz and in Mecca and Medina and throughout the Arabian Peninsula. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet Muhammad SAW the guidance to instruct right there in Mecca. Oftentimes we talk about the brotherhood that was established in Medina, and I'll mention that here today. But there was a unique brotherhood that it started with the brothers and sisters in Mecca. Look at how tribalistic that society was. Look at the position of the people who had been enslaved in Mecca at the time of the revelation of the Qur'an. Look at that aristocratic class of those who were from the leading tribe, from the Quraysh. Look at the rich merchants when you look at the history of Mecca at this time. Look at those rich merchants and see the kind of privileges that they were afforded just based on the wealth that they had in their pockets. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed and unfolded through the work of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam another system of how to evaluate, how to live in a human society, recognizing that everybody, there's no superiority of any person over another person except for albiyah, except for piety to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for this start in Mecca, where these tribal distinctions were almost overnight removed in the hearts of the believers, racism and tribalism are things that get deep-rooted in the hearts and in human society. So when I say overnight, these things were removed, not literally overnight, but in a short period of time. And then we have one of the most unique systems of brotherhood that the world has ever seen, that was established in Medina after the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu with his hijrah, because probably 99% of the Muslims of Mecca, those who migrated, had already migrated before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and Abu Bakr arrived in what was to become Medina. And what happened after his arrival. That the Prophet Muhammad SAW, being the social engineering genius that he was, recognized that those who have traveled, who've made this hijrah from Mecca to Medina, have left behind all of their wealth, all of their belongings, only what they could put on the back of a camel, only what are wealth that they could put on their own backs. So those rich merchants who were making this hijrah, but now starting basically from zero as it relates to economics. Those who were coming from backgrounds that were merchants, they were a mercantile for the most part class of people. Now they're migrating to an environment where the people are more into agriculture. And the money, even though you have markets, of course, but the money for Medina and Yathrib was coming through the trade that they were doing, through the merchandising, the growing of crops and the selling of food and vegetables and these kinds of things. So the Prophet Muhammad SAW established a system, what we now refer to as mu'aqqat. And this is a system, it just means entering into a brotherhood. And the brotherhood that the Prophet Muhammad SAW established, which you know better than I, was a brotherhood where the Prophet Muhammad SAW assigned a man of Mecca to be the brother of someone from Medina. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW matched these brothers up, not just on what profession they had. The Prophet Muhammad SAW was so brilliant. Allah gifted him in so many ways that he was matching up those with similar temperaments. He not only matched up brothers who had a history of making a lot of money, he not only matched them up together, but he matched up those, if there's a person who had a very gentle kind of nature, he matched them up, with, if possible, with another immigrant who had a similar kind of temperament. And so this mu'aqqat system is recognized by those who are not prejudiced against Islam as being the most unique system of brotherhood in the history of mankind, where you have a group of people coming to another area, and now they're being matched up with someone in that area, they're there already. And now those who are the answers, the helpers who are receiving these muhajirin, these are folks who are sharing half of everything that they own with their immigrant brothers and sisters who have come from Mecca. When we look at this, this is a tremendous event in the history of mankind. There is not a parallel to this mu'aqqat system that was established by the Prophet Muhammad in Medina. There's nowhere we can point to and say that this was equal to or parallel what the Prophet Muhammad established in Medina. And from this brotherhood, from this interdependence, we find that the attitudes that were in the past, before Islam and Jahiliyyah, that these attitudes about their brothers and sisters were automatically erased. Why? Because of the interaction between the brothers and sisters. Allah created a circumstance where there was a short-term dependency on the part of those who had migrated. There was the incentive on the part of those Ansar to do everything they possibly could for those who had made this hijrah because of the rewards and the benefit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had expressed through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and in the Qur'an. I just want to read this hadith. And this is a hadith that's found in both the Sahih of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. And it reads that Abdullah ibn Umar reported that the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said that the Muslim is the brother of another Muslim. He does not wrong him, nor surrender him. Whoever fulfills the needs of his brother, Allah will fulfill his needs. Whoever relieves a Muslim from distress, Allah will relieve him from distress on the day of resurrection. Whoever covers the fault of a Muslim, Allah will cover his fault on the day of resurrection. Brothers and sisters, the incentive, the divine incentive that Allah gives to the Ummah should be enough to have our interaction with our brothers and sisters falling in line with this description of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said. You don't harm one another with your tongue, with your hands. You don't turn your brother or sister into someone so that they can do harm to them. That they have some point of distress. You do everything that you can to relieve this distress. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنات وفي الآخرة حسنات وقنا عذاب النار. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him and seek His assistance against the evils of our minds and against the unsuccessfulness of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can lead astray. Whomsoever goes astray as a result of his actions, no one can lead aright. Oh Allah, help those who follow this religion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and make us of them. Oh Allah, those who turn against this way of life, do not make us of them. Brothers and sisters, the Brotherhood of Islam is what distinguishes this ummah from all of ummahs that have come before us. Now, I'm not trying to suggest in any kind of way that we have this eternal book called the Qur'an. That is a uniqueness. It certainly is. But if you and I don't embrace the principles of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as it relates to the brotherhood and sisterhood of Muslims, there's nothing that distinguishes us from other faith traditions. Nothing in the practice of the Muslims. I'm not talking about the theology. I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about the actions of the believers. If you and I are harming one another by one means or another, if we are backbiting and slandering one another, that's no different than what many of us who came out of a Christian tradition. That's what you see. And I can say on a personal level, I'm not trying to condemn Christians. What I experienced for 20 years of my life was the kind of backbiting and slander, and that woman thinks she looks cute with this dress on, but I really want to tell her how she looks. This guy thinks he knows the Bible or knows the scripture, but he doesn't know anything, no matter what form that we use to backbite and slander. Keep in mind that the practical expression of how this ummah is different than any other ummah is first how we treat and interact with one another before we even start looking to the responsibilities that we have to mankind, like feeding hungry people, like helping our neighbors in any way that we can, and stopping those things of fitna that we can stop with our hands, speaking out, or at least hating it in our heart before we even get to any of this. that we have this brotherhood, we have this sisterhood that is characterized by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said about it and what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has made very clear about it. I want to close with this particular observation. And it's a personal kind of observation. So I'm not trying to say this is not the Qur'an or Hadith. But about 58 years ago now, there was a Muslim in the United States. And this Muslim said that if America needs to understand Islam, because it's the one way of life that can cure this country from the cancer of racism. And the person who uttered those words was none other than Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X. And Malcolm was making this observation, having his father killed allegedly by racists, thrown on a trolley track and cut in half, having his house as a child firebombed by racists, have someone firsthand who was victimized, he and his family, by racism in the society. And Malcolm was saying, now that he understood what Islam truly represents, he was saying that America, if they want to rid their society of the cancer of racism, it needs to understand Islam. And I agree wholeheartedly with this observation, that no political party, whatever they're saying, are going to be able to rid this nation, no matter what their platform may be, of the attitudes and the mindsets of centuries of structural racism that it has gone since the existence of the country itself. And so appreciate, in closing, appreciate the value of guidance that we have in Islam. But it starts in-house. It starts with how I treat my other brothers. It starts with the recognition, as the Prophet Muhammad has articulated, and we see through the examples, that my religious brother, my Muslim brother, my Muslim sister, that person there, as the Prophet Muhammad that's your true brother, that's your true sister. Not because on the basis of belief, not your biological sister or brother, if they're not holding fast to this rope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has extended. Do it, oh Allah. Give us an understanding of this deen that will benefit us in this world and in the next. Oh Allah, strengthen our efforts to be those kinds of Muslims that are represented in this more system of entering into a brotherhood and sisterhood. And oh Allah, make not this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad an object of test for the disbelieving people. Brothers and sisters, just have a few quick announcements.
Allah